Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to the weekly or the bi-weekly RTI Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. We're coming to you, of course, the same from BHE and from Wehrs Machine in Bangor, Wisconsin. And we're ready to answer all you guys' questions. What's new and exciting at Wehrs Machine, Chad?
Pretty much the same old, same old. We today was a Monday in the middle of race season, so it was pretty exciting around here with crash repair stuff. But we're plugging away, making parts as fast as we can, and shipping them all over.
Well, it's kind of the same thing. We've kind of run into that same thing. Like I was telling you, and we've had, we've sold some cars, and we've had some really good sales here, and of course, the positive side of that is very positive. Of course, now I'm kind of getting to the point with the manpower that I have. I'm starting to get nervous on when we're going to be able to get these cars put together and stuff. But I know Rocky will do his best, and he's going to take a week off in June and go up and run the North Dakota Sport Mod Tour. And him and a couple of his buddies are going to go up there and do that. So that'll be a great deal. Looking forward to that. He, of course, the last time he was up there, he won the tour. So he's excited about going back. His new car's working pretty good, and things are going pretty good. We had a great list of winners this weekend. We got Mike Albertson, Justin Froming, Robert Witkoff, Dylan Silman, Jeremy Mills, Alec Fett, Tony Olson, Tyler Sobi Eschek, Bo Partain, AJ Ward, Brandon Cronkite, Josh Pfeiffer, and Josh Smith, just a few that we got information from. And of course, once again, we stress the fact that if you've had a good weekend or whatever your weekend has been, let us know. And I think, Chad, you've got that same thing going on. What's yours called, Chad?
We kind of followed you with the Wednesday winner, so Where's Wednesday winner, yeah.
Okay, got it. So yeah, so that's kind of exciting. We had some guys had some great success this weekend, and always look forward to it. First question, Chuck, what are your thoughts on chain limiters attachment points on the rear end, closer to the bell or more to the outside? Well, myself, I've always had better success, or I feel more comfortable with it being closer to the bell. It seems to be less sensitive to the tire. Still limits the suspension, but it doesn't want to try to snap the tire loose. When you get out closer to the cage and things like that, when the car rolls over, it just gets too rigid to the point where it's easy to affect the traction of that left rear tire. So being inboard, I feel, has been a lot better deal. What's your recommendations, Chad?
Yeah, same thing. The closer you get it to the bell, the less it's going to try and pick the left rear tire up, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, because you're kind of fighting, you're trying to get rods and your cage and everything's trying to push the tire down, and then you're kind of trying to pick it up. So they're kind of fighting each other a little bit. I'm taking a spoiler off of my IMCA Sport Mod to run at our local USRA track. I'm putting a slider on the left rear and a J-bar on the car. Any help on what else I could do to help without the spoiler? Basically, just you're going to have to tune the rear suspension. You might want to increase the rear percentage a percent. Because of course, with that spoiler, it's putting a little more downforce on the back of the car, so it's going to be a little bit more rear percentage. So that's one thing I would highly recommend. I think putting the left rear on a slider, that's going to help traction on that left rear. The J-bar is definitely going to help both tires keep in contact with the racetrack, because of course we're more in the center of the tires. So that's definitely something that I think is a good idea. Aaron, does pinion angle help with drive? Heard both sides to that theory. IMCA Sport Mod. Well, Aaron, I honestly agree with you. I've heard both sides. I still believe that it definitely helps with traction. The big thing is with pinion angle and is making sure that you have a good slip yoke and make sure that that everything moves uh, very well. Possibly raising the front of the motor up slightly or dropping the back of the motor up slightly if you decide to increase the pinion angle, just to kind of take some of that bind out of there. Because once you have a lot of angle in it, sometimes what can happen is it can actually hurt it a little bit, depending on if your yoke is not splined correctly, or I mean, if it's creating drag. Raymond, Bob, I hear you say around 55% left side. Is that with or without the driver? I recommend that 54% or 54 to 55% left side is with the weight of the driver in the car. Without the weight of the driver in the car, you'd probably want to look at 52 to 53 without an average 200-pound driver. Blake, 2020 GRT IMCA modified, 600-pound left front and right front, 200-pound left rear and right rear. Car's getting over on the right rear too hard. Want your thoughts on wanting to get it driving off the right front? Well, in my opinion, Blake, you're very stiff on the front of the car. Our normal is a pair of 500s. If the car is a little too free getting in, we stiffen the left front up to like a 550. Your 200 pounds in the rear, I'd actually go, what we actually run is like a 125 left rear spring, compressed, so that it's loaded to about 175 pounds. The right rear, we actually run a stiffer right rear. We run a 225-pound spring. I'd highly recommend that. The stiff front end is making the car fall on the right rear because it's so stiff it can't get over on the right front. Justin, what is the effect of going up with the right rear lower and the right rear upper rod in the bird cage the same amount on each? What's your opinion, Chad?
Well, I'm not sure what you're trying to achieve there. Going up on the cage on both of them, I've never actually done that. I've spread them out before, but raising the top, you're going to slow it down, and raising the bottom, you're going to speed it up. So I'd have to run that through the Ultraforce 4-link software to actually figure out what that's going to do. But if you're raising the bottom rod, frees the car up in and tightens it up off. Raising the top rod is probably going to tighten it up because you're taking angle out of the upper rod, but it could make the car real lazy laying on the right rear, and get the car into kind of a skate. So I'm not really sure if I would do that change myself. I would do one or the other. Yeah,
I would vote for raising the lower. We've had good success with that. Raising the upper, I've not really had great success with that because, once again, like Chad just says, anytime you take angle out of there, you'd have to raise it on the frame to maintain your angle. And what we've actually found, running a little bit more angle in that right rear upper bar really helps stabilize the car, gets the car so that it's not falling on the right rear so much, and still keeps side bite in the car, makes the center of the corner speed better, I think. That's just my opinion. Cody, good in the center, lacking drive off in my Razor Sport Mod. Any ideas of what to do? Well, not really knowing your whole setup and not knowing what all you've got going on. It's a little bit of a stab in the dark there, but we run a fair amount of trailing arm angle on the left rear to get the car coming off the corner. I run lead in our Sport Mod cars, so that the left rear is back a little bit. That seems to help drive the car off the corner better. But without knowing quite everything else that you've got going on, that would be a couple things I would think about. All right, so you got a 550 and a 525. That's pretty good. 250 left rear and a 225 right rear. Honestly, I would probably soften up that left rear. I mean, unless your left side percentage is fairly heavy, that's a lot of spring for the left rear of these cars anymore. A lot of times we'll run a 200 or even a 175 on that left rear, 225 on the right rear. In fact, I'd actually consider flipping your two rear springs around. I think that might actually tighten the car up a little bit getting in, but I think it'll rotate in the middle better and possibly help you come up off the corner better. Does anyone make a drop cup for a 5-inch spring deeper than the 2.5 or 2 3/4? I would have no idea. I don't think so.
I'm not sure if you're talking about a rear spring or a front spring. I mean, the front spring, we really can't make it any deeper because you're going to bottom it out in the lower control arm. So that's kind of why we're stuck at the 2.5. Plus, any spring table change that was more than that, you get to pretty drastic to where the car's going to roll over, and then you need to increase spring rate to sustain that roll. So the best balance we had was like a 2-inch drop on the right in the rears and a 2.5 in the right front. But I mean, I'd custom make you whatever you want, but you just have to be patient if you want to try something deeper. And I'm not sure if it's the front or the rear, but you know, that's one thing to think about is the more spring table you change, you know, it's going to definitely get some motion there.
Yeah, Kyle, I would be guessing that you're probably thinking of on a rear situation, but yeah, Chad answered that perfectly. I completely agree. Todd, on a dry slick just lifting off the throttle for corner entry, the rear end tries to pass the front end. What can I do to address this issue? Well, it depends on, once again, you know, I stress the fact of aligning the track of the rear end in comparison or in relationship to the front end. I always string line my cars, and I put the two left side tires in line. That'll usually suck the right rear end about 1.5 inches from the right front. I work a lot with wheel spacers, but if you're like an IMCA sport mod where you can't run wheel spacers, we tune our cars sometimes just lengthening and shortening the panhard bar. In your case, you know, shortening the panhard bar 1/8 of an inch might help. The other thing, and of course, it's hard to really say, but you know, the other thing that you could do is go start stiffening up that left front spring, so that when you get off the throttle, it doesn't unload to the left front so fast and unhook the right rear. That would be a couple suggestions. James, IMCA Sport Mod. Car is consistently tight on entry, both on and off the throttle. More so off. I added 1/4 inch of trail to the car and it helped a bit, but still is tight. Should I look for changing the spring or adding more left rear shock compression? Okay, it's consistently tight on entry. Well, this is a question that I always ask people when you're talking about tight on entry. You got to kind of think about when you're sitting in the seat and you're holding on the steering wheel. When the car gets into the corner, does it feel like it's falling to the right rear? Or is it driving over on the right front real hard and bottoming out, making the front end skate, which is causing a tightness condition? Kind of depends, you know, you kind of got to have an analysis of what's going on there. More left rear shock compression, yeah, that's going to unhook the car a little bit, but I don't think that's the problem here. Once again, you know, like I said, I tune these cars quite a bit. Sometimes just moving the rear end 1/8 of an inch to the right might be enough just to free it up getting in. If the car, what I have actually found a lot of times, if the car is toting the left front and just really laying on the right rear, that's usually the rear end alignment is not correct. Something to do with the way the rear end's in the car is not correct, and it's letting the car fall on the right rear. If you stiffen up your spring, that's going to put more load on the tire, but it's going to keep the car, more manageable through the corner. So it kind of just all depends on, once again, it's a kind of a general question. Hopefully those things will add, changing the spring, you could soften, you could soften up your left front spring. That would definitely help a little bit. Try going with a stiffer compression right rear shock so that it doesn't fall on the right rear as much. And then you got your J-bar or your Panhard bar, one or the other. Maybe you need to raise it on the rear end a little bit. And the 55-56% is with the driver also. Yep, Ray, that is correct. All of our measurements, we've kind of switched everything to with the driver in the car. We're seeing, some of these guys have some of the COVID effect, and so our weights are increasing, and we have to reshuffle things around so it works better if we have the driver in the car. Cody, have a GRT modified. Do you sell a one-piece upper A-frame? Want to get rid of the clevises? Yes, we do. We have one that fits our cars, and then we have one that fits the GRT car too. Just give Austin a call tomorrow here at the shop. And in fact, I think we just got A-frames in today. So I think we're in good shape. Kyle, rear spring stock car.
This is that spring.
With light rear, is this a question that I had before?
It's the spring table one with the drop cup.
Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. Okay, sorry. Rear spring, yep, I thought it was rear spring. Stock car, yeah, that makes sense. With the light right rear, I can't get spring table quite where I'd like it. Understand. Well, like Chad said, he could custom build you something if that would help. Of course, due to the fact that we're so far behind, everybody's so far behind, it might not be something that you'd be able to get immediately, but I'm quite sure Chad could work something out with him. Give him a call tomorrow and see what you can get worked out. How would I get the rear end to free up? I'm running a 125 left rear spring and a 200 right rear spring on the right rear. Still feels the car is stiff. Well, if you're talking to Nitro, if this is a 4-link car, as an example, it's going to feel stiff in dynamic mode or in static mode, just because when the bars are pushing against each other, everything's going to feel stiff. If you feel like it's stiff in running, that's a pretty common setup that we have. Maybe you can change some bar angles a little bit, which would help that. I would be afraid to go a whole lot softer. You can go softer on that left rear, and we've got guys that are running 75, 85s, 100-pound springs back there. But the right rear 200, most of the time we're at a 2 1/4. So hopefully that helps you.
Maybe it's time for some maintenance too. Something might be bound, you don't know. I mean, unhook the 4-link rods and the shocks and spin the cages and check the heim joints and make sure you're not battling a gremlin there in the maintenance department.
Good point. Alan, IMCA modified spacing between upper and lower bars on the right rear of the bird cage.
So most of them were our standard package, or most everybody's standard package is to start 4.5 up, 4.5 down. So a 9-inch spread would be pretty standard on a right rear cage.
On an IMCA modified, what would make a teeter-tot 604 crate? Set the car in the corner, left front lifts up, and then it will teeter-totter on the up and down pull bar problem or right rear shock. Once again, Mark, it's like I've said earlier in the show, I still am very, very critical on making sure that rear end right to left is where it needs to be. In that situation, I would actually lean towards, I would put a spacer on the right rear. You can stiffen up the shock, but the weight's still going to get there. I don't think, unless you have the pull bar all the way to the left of the car, I don't see the pull bar being part of the problem. You could, if you're center, you could move the pull bar an inch to the right, but more than likely it's a rear end spacing, because it kind of sounds like the rear end might be just a little bit too far to the left. That causes that problem pretty constant. Any suggestions you got, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, it could be right top rod angle too flat too, and making that thing wheelie up. And I've actually seen the left bottom rod too much angle, and if that left bottom rod gets too much motion, and it can act like a jack, so it'll pick the left side of the car up and make it wheelie on the right rear. So sounds like there's maybe a couple things going on there that you need to inspect.
And that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was up to Algona last Thursday night, and we had a customer that had a lot of left rear lower angle in it, and he was kind of having a little bit of the same issue where he felt like it was on the right rear too hard. And what I actually did for them in this situation, the changes that we actually made was we shortened the left front chain 1/4 of an inch, raised the right upper bar to the 1 hole above where it was, and dropped the left lower bar 1 hole, so that it took some of that angle out of it, and it made the car much more stable. Ryan, switch sanctionings on a B-Mod. Used to run a lot of angle in the left rear, pretty flat on the right rear 3-link. Now I have 5 degrees. So you went to a Wasota B-Mod. As a starting point, should a person have more angle or less angle in both? Honestly, I would say more angle on both I would lean a little more in that direction. However, you might consider lengthening your right rear trailing arm. That seems to work pretty well when you have that angle separation rule, because you can actually run more angle on that right rear. And what it does when you lengthen it, that kind of slows the action down. So it kind of offsets having the extra angle in there. And that's a pretty common thing. I mean, I've seen some guys that are, I think your rule, you got to, the Wasota rule is you can be 2 inches longer or shorter between the 2 rods. Like, so if your left rear is 16, you could run a right rear 18-inch bar and be legal. So I think that's something to keep in mind if you do change that. But that's something that I've actually, we've had some customers up there that seems to work well for them. IMCA Sport Mod running a 475 left front, 525 right front, a 150 left rear, and a 200-pound right rear. Lacking drive on dry slick. Any ideas? Well, what I have found with a sport mod car is that soft left rear can have its moments where it is bad to the bone, depending on the racetrack itself. I myself still go with the a little heavier. I would go a little heavier in spring rate. I'd probably go to a 175 or a 200-pound left rear, 225-pound right rear. Biggest thing is, and you can adjust the lead, putting a little bit of lead in the car definitely helps the car square up, because, and make sure everybody understand when I'm saying putting lead in there. Now keep in mind, you've got a race car that if you're running 25 degrees angle on the left rear and you're running 6 or 7 or 8 degrees on the right rear, you're getting 2 3/4 of an inch of steer in that thing as it goes through its motion. So when we say put a little lead in it, we're basically changing it in a static fashion from 2.5 inches to maybe 2 1/4 inches. So you're still going to have trail in the car due to the amount of movement that the rear end gets. So that's kind of important to understand that, a lot of people will go, wow, I can't put lead in it because then the right rear is ahead of the left rear. Well, it's not in dynamic mode. If you spread the right rear bars on a 4-bar, will it act like a 3-link? If so, how much spread on the bird cage should you have with it? Well, Chad basically just answered that. The bird cage, in my opinion, on the right rear, we go to that 4.5 and 4.5 as our standard. The lower one, we might raise it up 1 hole and go to 4 on the lower one to get a little bit more traction. But spreading the bars out, and you can actually talk about that, Chad.
Yeah, there's a few really fast cars actually in the country that like to take their rods and spread them on the right rear cage. And what you need to do though is not just spread them on the cage and change the angle. The right way to do the right rear change to make it act more like a 3-link car is to keep the angles in the bar the same. So if you're running 0 in the bottom and 18 in the top, you spread them out the same distance on the frame as you do on the suspension cage. So you keep the angle and the drive angle the same. You're just changing the motion ratio of the cage, slowing it down to where when it indexes slower into that spring to build the traction. So it kind of makes the car lay on the right rear. Then in a sense, you can, run a stiffer spring rate to drive the tire in the racetrack. So that's one of them things that there's some guys that have put that on and can't seem to drive it. And it's a timing issue because I feel that right rear cage doesn't move a lot. I know you got a lot of videos in the school that we watch and we study the right rear travel, and that you're timing out a split second in that corner entry. And if you don't like the way that feels, then you're going to instantly take that off there. So it kind of depends on how you drive the race car too. So that's basically spreading the bars on the right rear cage.
Justin's got a question. What difference will you feel running the pull bar behind center of the housing or in front of center of the housing? Well, Justin, I don't know. Maybe Chad knows. I don't know if I can actually answer that feel question. In theory, the car with it in front of center will be maybe quicker to react, but not last as long. The pull bar behind center will still react pretty decent, but it will take angle out of the pull bar, which in turn, some guys believe that does give more forward traction. I see guys both ways, and I've seen guys fast on both ways. So I don't have. What's your opinion, Chad?
Yeah, that's on a UMP car where you're traveling the pull bar a long ways, you can't go behind center. I don't feel. And the hard tire cars where we're only traveling the pull bars an inch or whatnot, I think then a guy could go back and gain traction. That again is going to be a situation where you're changing the decel and the XL of that pull bar. So it's going to be about you and how you feel about that. The longer arm is going to be a slower, so it'll, like you said, carry it down the straightaway farther. So it's a balancing act. There is no magical spot. I think it's about tuning your race car to what you like to feel. So if you like that longer arm, longer traction, then I would go back.
Yeah. What's your opinion on short or longer upper A-frames on an IMCA Rage? I really couldn't give you an opinion on that. Justin's the guy to actually talk to about that. He would be the one that would be, he designed the car. He knows where everything is at on the car. So it would be injustice for me to give an opinion because I don't know all of the elements to that question. Having a problem sticking the right front, helping the front skate. I don't know if that's necessarily an A-frame issue. That's something that, like I said, Justin could definitely give you some help on that. But I would probably, look at maybe softening the right front a little bit, or getting the car maybe a little bit more angle in the left rear to get the car over on the right front a little more, something to that effect. Because if the front end's skating, it basically means that the right rear tire's out driving the. Chad, do you still make the old style non-outside grab spring cups? Coilover kit. Have some springs that won't fit in cups.
Yeah, what we were finding is that, obviously there's so many spring manufacturers, it's hard to know everybody's exact sizes, and they have tolerances. And so we designed the OD cup to be this really nice, perfectly lined up device, and then you have issues with different spring manufacturers. So I know the coilover kits had the ID and the OD, and I was not happy with having the ID in there also. I don't know what you're running, what brand you're running, David, but it could be, we've had a couple instances where the end coil was just a little sharp point was sticking out and not allowing it to go in there, but we are currently working on the situation. So I think we do have a few old ones left. I don't know what brand you're on. If you give me a call tomorrow, we can try and round something up and see what we got around here for you.
Cody, on a zero index, what is too much angle percentage on the left rear bottom and the top rod? Smooth, slick racetrack. I can tell you the angle on the top rod, with the zero indexing, I wouldn't go over 50 degrees. I've heard some guys going more than that, but the biggest thing you have to remember is you don't want that rod pointing straight up, because then it'll become povo stick. So the more angle you put in it in dynamic mode is going to be too much. 45 to 50 degrees, I still think is pretty good. What's your opinion on the lower one?
Well, like I said earlier, with that lower bar making the car wheelie, you're going to know when you got too much left bottom rod, because you're going to be loose in the middle and way too much roll steer. And, I don't think I'd start over 8 degrees, 10 degrees in a left bottom rod. I don't even know whether that ends up dynamically on most cars, but I don't know. You're going to know when you got too much drive angle and too much roll steer in the left rear for sure.
Yeah, and I don't, without looking into my notebook, I couldn't tell you, Cody, what the left rear lower was on that situation, but I tend to like it with less angle than more, just because of that fact. Oh, Ryan, you're already at a 15 and a 17. Okay, so you're already longer. Yeah, switch sanctioning bodies. I would actually, that 25 and 20, that's quite a bit on that. I mean, I would love to have that on that left rear. 20 on that right rear is a little strong. You might be looking at trying to split the difference there and going with 20 and 15. And lead in those cars definitely helps. Okay. No matter what I do, when I pick up the throttle hard in the middle, it has a bad power push. Takes the car so it can't rotate. IMCA modified 4-link. Well, once again, we talked about that rear end location. That's something to think about, because sometimes when you really have to focus hard on what that power push, if it's the left rear that's actually pushing, or if the right rear is stuck too hard and not getting the car to rotate enough. I'm not a big fan of taking traction away from the left rear, so what I would do is I'd try putting more bar angle in that right upper bar. That would be one of the things that I would do. Once again, try a wheel spacer. If it's a power push, that could be too aggressive of a left rear shock, can cause a power push like that, because what happens, like say when you get those wild numbers like a 15.2 or whatever, what can actually happen with that little rebound. Now we're starting to see more trend going to more rebound and less compression on those left rears, because it can cause that kind of a situation. So, you'd have to kind of look at what your left rear shock is. That's something that, softening the compression, stiffening the rebound might be a little bit better of a situation. But I would almost believe if it's in the middle of the corner, it's very possible it could be stuck too much on the right rear. I have a sport mod with the OD grab right front with the bearing. I'm running a 450 right front spring and a 550 left front spring. It's bottoming out hard and getting a death push. I put 7 turns in the right front from the chassis builder's specifications. The push got better. I'm thinking I need more spring. How much would you recommend me increasing weight? Car was built with no drop ID cup. In my opinion, yeah, you got 100 pounds of split, which is going to make the car pretty tight getting in to begin with. 450 with a sport mod is a little light. I've got some guys on 500s, but my 450 stuff is pretty much the A mod group. 450 left front or 450 right front's definitely going to get the car in, and it's probably not going to hold the car up. With the 4-link stuff, we've got more things going on. We've got pull bars and things like that, so it helps it. But also the other thing is, I don't know what you're running for rear springs, but try stiffening the right rear spring up 25 pounds. That's another idea, because that can help too. Chad, can you show how of cup adapter worked on the older style right front drop cup?
I'm sure you're talking about the ring, the OD. I don't know if I got one out here. It was a aluminum ring that we put on over the screw jack or over the spring cup to align the spring. The fun haters really didn't like the fact that it was aluminum, so that's why we just built it into the spring cups. I don't see one out here in the showroom. I can run grab one. Hang on.
Okay. Todd, you mentioned running lead on the left rear on a sport mod. You're working in 1/8 to 1/4 inch range. Yeah, Todd, that is for sure. It's hard to make people believe that an 1/8 of an inch can make that much of a difference. I never go more than 1/4, and even going to 1/4, that's a desperate condition. An 1/8 of an inch is a very tunable, drivable change that you will notice. Justin, what are the effects when you move the pull bar from the left of the drive shaft to the right of the drive shaft? Well, what I found in the past, Justin, what happens when you're to the left of the drive shaft, it kind of can tend to try to pick the left front up. And of course, when you try to pick the left front up, what's going to happen? It's going to fall on the right rear, and then all of a sudden we got too much load on the right rear. I've found, especially with a crate motor, when you move it like an inch from right of center, that the car seems to be more stable, doesn't roll in the right rear as much, and it actually has more traction. Now, in theory, you would think you'd want to hook the left rear up, but one thing we've got to remember with the crate motors, we can't overhook them. If we hook those cars up with a crate motor too tight, you're losing horsepower. You're wasting the little horsepower that you have. So our standard deal is when the car goes out of here, it's 1 inch to the right of center. Especially if I know it's a crate car. No such luck. Oh yeah, there we got it.
So this was the ring that we'd adapt on the spring cups. We did it for the slider cup. It doesn't fit the front spring cups as good as it did the slider cups. There's still about 3/16 of wiggle there. So, and having to sell you a spring cup and then this just kind of didn't make a lot of sense. That's why we just built it right into the spring cups.
Jesse, running street stock class in West Virginia, stock lowers and shocks, no weight jacks, just adjustable or just can adjust cups. How can a chain limiter in the left front help get drive and speed? Well, how a chain limiter would help you is in this situation is if the car is getting a lot of roll to the right rear. One thing that we've run with the chain limiter, we limit the left front travel, and it actually will help the car. Sometimes it can free the car up a little bit getting in, but as the car goes to do through its transition, when the left front stops, it actually takes the load and moves the load to the left rear. When the left front is in motion, it's transferring the weight to the right rear. But once it stops, it becomes left side percentage and ends up loading the left rear. So it would give you more traction up off the corner is what would help, what could help you in that deal. What will limiting the right front travel do on an A mod? How will it? Okay.
How will it handle in the rough?
Oh yeah, how will it handle in the rough? Well, I mean, anytime you limit suspension, it's not going to be as favorable. One thing though, with
is it an IMCA car?
it says, well,
because it's illegal to do that, right?
Yeah, it's illegal on an IMCA car. Let's go back down. His very last post says, how would you limit? How will limiting right front travel do on an A mod? Well, it doesn't say it's an IMCA car. If it's a non-IMCA car, it basically just helps you to preload that right front spring. So you can run a little bit softer spring with some preload in it, get your load numbers where you want it, and it'll be pretty good. Most generally, the roughness is not going to affect the right front because the car is over on the right front in static mode to begin with. So I don't see it being an issue. If I was limiting the other three corners, I think it probably, or especially the right rear, I'd be concerned. But I don't think it would hurt you that much. But once again, just kind of depends on how rough we're talking about. Amber, I have 2 questions. Awesome. Thanks, Larry. We appreciate that. Amber, whenever you want to let us know what your 2 questions are, we'll do our best to help answer those. So where'd you go racing this weekend, Chad?
I went to Fountain City to the World of Outlaws and the USRA Modifieds, and that was a heck of a show, man. Bob and his group, they've done such a good job turning that track into one of the best in the country. They added a bunch of stands, and the surface was smooth and fast, and it was a pretty exciting race, and it was a good show for sure. A lot of fun.
I've heard a lot of great compliments to Bob and the staff up there that they put on a pretty decent racetrack. I've actually not made it up there to see it since they actually took over it, which has been a long time. But that's on my bucket list this year is to go up there to.
I got a deal for you. My cabin's right there across the river, so we can go fishing and then we can go racing.
Well, that might make it. Well, that might push it to the top of the list. Yeah. I went fishing Friday night. Saturday it rained all day, which we needed to rain. My lawn definitely needed to rain, but kind of dampened my fishing spirits. Well, that didn't work out, LOL. If you have your frame height set, then scale the car, and you have to change stuff to get your numbers right. Which is more important, numbers on the scale or the frame heights? Well, Amber, to be honest with you, you can get both. It takes a lot of process of working a little bit on each corner to do that. And so, in other words, say for example, your left front frame height was too too high, but your right front frame height is too low. Well, what I would actually do there then is I would take a turn out of the left front. I'd put a turn in the right front, but then I'd also take a turn out of the left rear to compensate for the turn that I put in the right front, and I would probably add a turn to the right rear. When you do it in that X fashion, whatever you do on one, you do the same thing on the other, left front, right rear, right front, left rear. You can get it. I've had nights where I've been pulling my hair out to do that, but it can be done. I would probably go a little more towards my scaling numbers unless my ride heights were off a lot. I mean, if they're off just 1/8 of an inch or something like that, I'm probably not going to sweat it a whole lot. If they're off big numbers, the ride heights are most important, especially in the front of the car. That's okay, Amber. I've hit the buttons too many times too, and geez, who knows what happens, man. And then these guys around here laugh at me, and then they call me like an old duffer, and they come up with other old men names and stuff. What the heck? I can still run a computer. I mean, I even know still how to turn it on. Okay. What happens if you lower the entire car? Same amount on each corner. Well, if you lower the car, it's not going to change it's going to change your ride heights. It's not going to change your scale numbers if you do everything equally. Depending on what your car is, it's not we're starting to see people running the front of the car lower, getting more angle in the A-frames. That seems to be kind of a trend. So it's not going to hurt you unless it's, of course, too low. But anyway, whatever the case is. Chad, which of your pull bars that you sell do you recommend for UMP, A-Mod 4-bar open motor, and how much preload?
The UMP cars, open motors definitely need to be a spring pull bar, in my opinion. They just have way too much movement with the open motor and the sticky tires, and definitely a spring bar. We put together an AFCO package with an AFCO progressive spring and some of our pucks inside, and we really like that on the UMP cars. We also have quite a few Belleville bars in the UMP world, which is the Belleville bar is real nice because it's like a linear like a spring, but decels like a puck bar, so it doesn't have all the stored energy of the big spring. So when you drive in the corner, there isn't that sheer traction force, the big decel force. So, but I would probably pick the AFCO progressive big spring bar that we build.
John, we answered John's. Nitro, I'm running a 600 on the left front and a 500 on the right front using Bilstein's 60/20 on the right front and a 40/20. Running 8-inch ride height on the left front and 7 3/4-inch ride height on the right front. Does it sound like a good place to start on an IMCA modified? Honestly, Nitro, I think you're pretty high. Our measurements, that 600 left front, I probably would lean towards a 550. Only have a 50-pound split in the front. The 8 inches of ride height, we actually run our cars, our left front 7 5/8, and our right front is 7 3/8. And we vary 7 1/2 and 7 1/4. We've had better luck getting the front of the cars down a little bit more. Seems like the aerodynamic part of it is another big advantage too. Now it's possible you go a little lower, you're going to feel like you're bottoming out, but just change your driving style a little bit, back up your corner a little bit, and it'll work good. On an A-Mod, moving the rear end to the right 1/2 inch, would you leave the right rear spring in the same location on the frame with no change in a spring rate, or move the same amount of? I'd actually, if I was going to first of all, a half an inch is a lot. A quarter of an inch is more safe in my opinion. If I was only going to go a quarter, I wouldn't change anything. If I was going to go a half an inch, what I would do is I'd move the top of my spring out and use the same spring rate, so that way you're not changing multiple things, so you can tell what really actually happened and what worked better. Right rear spring angle, and if you increase the right rear spring angle, what happens is, of course, it's going to soften the rate of the spring. So let me reread this here a little bit. Frame mount. Right rear spring angle will increase roll stiffness. It will, but I don't think that's gonna. I think that would be okay if you move that top of that spring out, because most likely you're moving the top of the spring out an inch, where your rear end you're moving a half an inch. I don't think that would hurt you, because when you move the rear end out like that, a little more spring stiffness wouldn't hurt it at all. I think you'd like it better. So you been fishing yet, Chad?
Yesterday. Finally.
Yesterday. Finally. Yeah, I was going to go yesterday myself too, but my daughter said she was going to come up and plant some flowers for me. So I figured I better take her up on that, because anytime I get volunteers, it's pretty dumb to not do that. Planted a tree yesterday, so now my backyard has 2 trees in it again. Not 5 like it had last year at this time, but at least we're getting there. That spindly little tree looks pretty freaking little back there, but it'll grow. CJ, 3-link B-mod springs in front. What would you recommend for the J-bar split in the pinion height? Well, on a B-mod, if you're running a quick change, I would go 1.5 inches above, or 1.25 inches above center of the rear end is where I would start with. And then I would probably start with about 6 inches of split. The springs on the front, once again, that softer. If you like the car being a little tighter getting into the corner, I'd run a 550 left front, 500 right front. Some guys like the stiffer right front. Problem with it is, depending on everything, on a real slick racetrack, that 550's right on the edge of being too stiff on the right front, but we've got guys running a 550. Of course, it kind of also depends on if you're running pinto spindles or if you're running 3-piece spindles. I've found the 3-piece spindles like a little softer front end. Pinto spindles, the way the inclination is on them, and where the pin height is, it seems like they kind of like a little bit stiffer spring. Okay, what's your opinion on starting indexing on the right rear out of the spring or starting into the spring? What's the effect?
Right rear, I would start 0 to 3 degrees. Well, 0 to 2 degrees into the spring on the right rear. I think that's generally where most people are starting, right, Bob? Your time.
Yeah, I wouldn't index out of that spring, because that's going to create a delay in the swing, and it's going to make the car fall on the right rear for a split second. I think Chad's right on that. 0 to 2 is pretty common.
And it's just you're timing out that first couple seconds of that cage indexing to build the spring stiffness on corner entries. So it tightens up your corner entry when you speed up that rotation.
Yep. Chad, what is the life expectancy of the Belleville's? Oh yeah, quick change. Sorry, CJ, I didn't see it. The quick change, like I said, I would start out 1.25 inches above, which is basically, if you had a 9-inch Ford, that would put it in the center. And then I start with a 6-inch split on the frame. 650 right front and plows corn. Yeah, that's pretty stiff. In today's technology, that's a pretty stiff front end. The car's just, it's going to fight itself to get over on the right front. And what's going to happen is it's just so stiff that it shears traction on that tire. Okay. I have a 2012 GRT INCA open motor that I just had the BHA 2021 front end update on. What should I do for offsets on the wheels? Well, what I recommend, because, and this is just my opinion here, I'm a firm believer in wheel spacers because that gives me options. So I tell all of our customers to buy all 3-inch offset wheels, and then on the front I put a 1-inch offset or 1-inch spacer on both sides, and the left rear I put a 1-inch spacer on both sides. Now, if you have 2-inch offset wheels, they're the same thing. We're just doing it with wheel spacers. But if you're going to go, and the thing that I like about that is now all of a sudden that left rear tire, if I want to say it's got maybe a couple nights on it that I more than I need to, if it's the right size, I can always move it to the left front, maybe get another night out of it. I'm not a big believer in this overworking myself at the racetrack, and I'm not a big fan of getting all dirty at the racetrack either. So this changing tire thing would not be Bob's idea of fun at all. None whatsoever. I see guys do it, and you know that's great if you have the amount of crew to do all that stuff, but I'd make it easy and use wheel spacers. Let's see, next one. On a 3,000-pound Pro Stock, what would you recommend all 4 corners for ride heights? Well, a Pro Stock, I'm pretty sure you're using the metric front end. I still run, I mean, I run that thing as close to the ground as I could get it without the movement, and we always measure from the center of the lower control arm bolt, the front lower control arm bolt, down to the ground. That car, you're probably going to want numbers in the front, 7 3/4 in that neighborhood, because it depends on your tire too, right? And I don't know if you're running an IMC Pro Stock. I'm not sure what size tire you're running. If you're running like that UMP type tire or the Wasota type tire, you're going to be in the 8-inch range for ride heights in the front. If you're running a shorter tire like that IMCA tire, that 7.5-inch range would be pretty good. What's the life expectancy of the Bellevilles in that style pull bar?
Greased, I would run them 15 nights. Dry, probably going to get 8 nights out of them.
Pat, we were just talking about you here earlier tonight before we went on the air, and I was starting to get a little bit nervous when I was looking at the time was 8:50 or 7:55, and I had not heard from my old buddy Pat. So I appreciate you chiming in here. Always nice to know that you're listening. Chad, can you make a 9-inch drive plates?
No, we'll leave that to the hub manufacturers.
Okay, so what actually is it timing? Yeah, 7:59. Okay, 2 more questions. Was sort of modified, struggling on marbles. Car is stuck on entry to the middle, but tends to tail out coming off the corner, and when you get on the gas, what would you try? Well, my simple thing is, once again, I'm a big believer in putting the lead in the car. If the tail's kicking out on you, that means that it's getting too much steer up off the corner. The problem is if you reduce steer, I mean, you could lower your right upper bar, and that might help you off the corner. The problem is going to be is it's going to hurt you getting in and through the middle. So I work a lot with lead and trail in these cars. It's an easy adjustment, and it's very very effective. Thanks for continuing these shows. I have not missed an episode. I re-listen to them while I'm traveling to the races. Well, I appreciate that, Chris. That's great. Hi, guys. We took the class, and it bumped us from mid-pack to second last year. Way to go, Brad. That's congratulations. That's awesome. What's the difference between a brake floater and a brakes clamped on to the cage?
So the brake floater is a pretty standard one with the brake arm going to the chassis. A little bit more tunable than when you put the brake on the cage. With the brake on the suspension cage, you're hooked right directly into the motion goes through the 4-link rods. So generally you got a little more angle in that rod, and you're also transferring the energy through the spring, which is farther back. So it's kind of like a double-edged deal where you got two things going on at once. So it's a little more effective than the brake floater. My theory on it is a shorter track, I'd be on the cage, and on a big sweeping corner fast track, I'd be on the brake floater. You can tune them to be pretty close to the same thing. Some guys that like to brake heavily, and when they put it on the cage, they're just slamming the right front into the racetrack. So it generally doesn't work well for a heavy breaker, but that's the main difference. Is I would do short track on the cage and bigger track on the brake floater arm.
Chad, we checked our bar toe, and it seems like we need the top bars to be offset inboard on the left rear and outboard on the right rear. Is that common?
Well, I would never, on the right rear, I would not run outboard, right? You're going to move the rear end to the left. You're going to point towards the door and be just massively throttle tight. When you're standing at the back of the car, basically scale that ride height. You want the left bottom rod to be pretty much straight. Left top rod's going to be pointed towards the left front a little bit. And the left rods we like to see pretty much straight. The biggest thing is when you get into that motion that you don't have any Heim bind. And like I said, that right rear top one, if that's pointed towards the door, that's going to be a throttle push for sure. And the car is going to be probably not tunable because that drive angle will try to dominate corner exit. So bar toe is very important, often overlooked on a lot of race cars. A lot of times if the spacer's on the chassis, you got to shorten along. A lot of times they get flopped and they aren't where the chassis builder wanted them. And it's a common problem to have your bar toe messed up and really affect the way the race car handles.
It definitely really affects the way the car works. There's no doubt about that. Okay, guys. It's a little after 8 already, and so we appreciate you guys listening. And once again, we thank you for your business, and we will see you again next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, the next show, actually, I'm going to be out of town in 2 weeks, so our next show is going to be June 7th. So stay tuned, and we'll keep you posted on Facebook of what's going on. Hopefully, we're gonna try to have a guest for that. I'm not sure who that's going to be yet, but we're going to try to change it up a little bit and get a guest on here. So thanks again for listening. We always appreciate your comments. Once again, those of you who are on our products, make sure you let us know how you're doing, and we want to recognize you if you're doing good. The gentleman that took the class and was very thankful and ran second last weekend. Second's pretty good, man. I tell you what, a lot of guys would love to run second. That's a pretty good place. So once again, thanks again, guys.
Thanks and good luck.